Well, good morning and welcome to Prairie Lakes. I am really glad that you're here. I know Pastor Chip last weekend said this to all of you. I want to echo, happy summer. Happy summer, okay? Yeah, we can clap for summer. That's fine. And hey, we're 2 weeks away from the days getting shorter and the midpoint to Christmas. They ruined it for you. How about that? All right. Hey, we are doing a new series starting this weekend. I want to introduce this series to you by giving you 3 quotes. They're all from the same book. And then I want you to kind of guess what book it's from. And really what I want, if you don't know the book, it's fine. But like what I really want you to guess is what year was this book written? Okay, what year was this book written? Here's quote number 1, all right? Quote number 1 is, people will come to adore the technologies that undo their capacities to think. Okay? People will come to the door and they'll undo their capacities. Okay. All right, quote number 1. Quote number 2, most of our daily news is inert, consisting of information that gives us something to talk about. We talk a lot about it, but it can't lead to any meaningful action. Okay, quote number 2, here's the last one, okay? The last one. All that has happened is that the public has adjusted to incoherence, right? What's real? None of it's real. None of this makes any sense. We've just adjusted to that, and we've been amused into indifference. I don't know what's going on in the news. Have you seen that new TikTok reel, right? Okay, so there's the 3 quotes. Any guess as to what the book is and really what year is it written? I'm going to give you like 2 seconds just to think about it. Here's the answer, okay? The book is called Amusing Ourselves to Death. It was written by Neil Postman in 1985. 40 years ago to the year, okay? Now, I am always amazed by people who write things that in hindsight seem even more prophetic than when they were written. I mean, because every single one of those quotes could have been written in 2025 for 2025, okay? So I think Neil Postman would be super glad about the series that we're doing this weekend. Here's what we're calling it. We're calling it Convenience is King. Convenience is King, okay? So the working title for this, and you're going to understand when I give it to you why we didn't go with it, but the working title of this was actually The Cancer of Convenience. And the reason we didn't go with it is because we're not trying to make light of that disease, especially if you're battling it right now, and a lot of people in my world are. But the idea behind that is really kind of probably the point of the series and the closer to the bullseye. Because here's what we would say. We would say, even though convenience is king, it's just not a very good one. Even though convenience is king, it's just not a very good one, which is really what Postman was talking about. In fact, convenience really acts a lot like a cancer because it rots us out from the inside, and it's super hard to deal with. It's just really, really hard to deal with. Now, ironically, maybe not ironically, but kind of hilariously, the subject of Neil Postman's book, what he was so concerned about was the rise of TV, okay? Like the console TV was the face of his book. And if you don't know what a console TV is, we used to make TVs. They had rounded screens, and they were built in these massive oaken pieces of furniture. And they had an antenna sometimes on the top of it that had tinfoil, and you had to adjust the tinfoil right to get the 4 channels, okay, all right. So, of all of the warnings Postman issued in his book, all of them probably only exponentiated as time went on, right? Because we had cable TV, and then we had the rise of the internet, and then we had social media and all the things, okay? To the point where here's what we would say, and here's really the serious part of the series, is for a lot of us now, convenience is no longer just an option. Convenience is an opiate. It's not just something that we either do or don't do. It's something that we all do, and it's something we're addicted to, and we've grown dependent on. When it's taken away from us, we experience withdrawal, and we really get kind of mad, maybe real mad. It's a drug, okay? And all of us, I think, from 90 to 9 are addicted to it and we're dependent on it. Now, we've talked a lot about stuff like this or maybe in the same sandbox at Prairie Lakes. And I'm not going to go back over and relay some of the groundwork. But if you're wanting to kind of get a refresher, we did a series called Attention Wars back in 2022. We did Scrolling in 2024. And just this year, back in April, not too long ago, we did Anxious Generation. So, but here's how this series is going to be a little bit different. Because in this series, what we want to do is we want to talk about the impact that this culture of convenience has on how we practice our faith. What kind of impact is this having? And then what can we do about it? You know, how do we navigate that? So here's where we're going in this series, okay? This weekend, we'll be talking about, you know, hey, when convenience sits on the throne of our lives, when it's our king, what happens is some of these adventures that God's calling us on, we start to feel like they're threats. They kind of, I don't know whether I like them. They're not, I don't think they're adventures. I think they're just another thing we got to do, you know? So that's this week. And next weekend, we'll talk about how convenience and our addiction to it, sometimes it makes people into problems. We'll talk a little bit about that. And the last weekend is there's some opportunities that God has for us, I think, that we start to feel like our obligations when convenience is our king. So let's jump into the topic this weekend, when adventures become threats. And let's jump into it by turning our topic into a couple of questions, okay? So here's the questions I want to wrestle with and answer over the course of our time this weekend. Question number one is this: What adventures is God maybe inviting me to go on with him? What adventures is God maybe inviting me to go on with him? And how does convenience sometimes just make my default switch or my default setting, nope, nope, not doing that, you know? Like, how does that work, okay? If I phrased it for my kids, okay, here's how I would phrase it to them. I would say, hey, why do we sometimes ghost God? Why do we sometimes ghost him? And if you're wondering, can I feel both of my kids cringe as I say that? Yes, I can. And I love it. I love it. Okay. Those are the questions for us this weekend. Now, here's what I'd like to do. Okay, I'd like to just answer that question up top. And then I want to unpack the answer for the rest of our time. Why do we turn God down? Why do we ghost him? Why so often is our default setting, no thanks? Well, here's why. Convenience is a king who encourages us to soothe and serve ourselves, okay? So grab onto that. Convenience is a king that encourages us, hey, you can soothe yourself and you can serve yourself, okay? And because that's the case, even the best of adventures with God become threats to our comfort and our happiness. Because if I'm not serving myself and I'm not able to soothe myself, I don't know that I'm going to like that. That's really what's going on, okay? Now, convenience is so enmeshed in our culture that sometimes it's really hard for us to identify because it's just the norm. It's woven into the fabric of everything. And so let me just help us kind of identify it a little bit. Just in everyday lives, here's how this works for us, okay? Every single day, if you want to calm your mind down, just take a break, just kind of soothe yourself, right? Every single day. Convenience encourages you to what? Right? Every single day. You have a little drug, me too, in your pocket. You really do, okay? Just think about this. And I fly, I'm on a plane about once a month. And so I'm amazed. Whenever I'm on like the train from the plane to the rental car or whatever, nobody's looking up. Next time you're in any situation where a group of people has to wait for something, in your situation where you have to wait, in line, whatever, right? I want you to count how many people are not on their phones. Okay? You can soothe yourself. Now, God has some ideas about how to calm your mind down that maybe don't involve scrolling, but I don't know, those all seem like they seem hard. They seem hard to do, right? Okay, so that's one way. How about this one? You get hungry. Get hungry. All of us get hungry, okay? There's a bunch of convenient options. You can eat whatever, whenever, whatever you want. In fact, if you don't want to cook, you just click a couple things, and then someone will do all the cooking for you, and then they'll deliver it to your house. I know. It's nuts, right? Now, Jesus talks a lot about being hungry. He talks a lot about it. Blessed are those who hunger and thirst after righteousness. Hey, when you fast, do it this way. Hey, I'm the bread of life. I mean, for Jesus, hunger is a pathway for us to kind of go deeper with God, or, DoorDash. Either way, right? Okay. How about this one? Just general community. Just feeling connected to people. Do you just keep it surface level on social media and post your highlights and interact with someone else's highlights? Do you just kind of swipe right or swipe left? Do you just interact with most of the people who think like you and agree with you? There's a lot of convenient options here. Or do you listen to what God has to say about true friends sticking closer than family? About, building the kind of relationships where we're laying down our lives for one another. Where we bear one another's burdens. Where we know one another deeply enough to actually speak meaningfully into one another's lives. Here's the deal, okay? King Convenience declares, and it just issues this edict time and time again: whatever you want, whenever you want, however you want it. It's he just shouting that from his throne in your life all the time. And therein lies the problem, okay? Because tell me you can create a better life than that, right? That's the pinnacle, Tell me, sounds weird to say, tell me God can do better than that, If you're really trying to say that convenience makes me a slave to my own self-interest, I kind of want to say, no, but it just makes me in charge of my own life. What's the problem with that? Well, Scripture's going to challenge us in that, and here's what Scripture's going to challenge us with. Scripture's going to say, while convenience promises you a simpler life, what it delivers to you is something far less satisfying. It's going to promise you something that it fails to deliver. This is my guilty pleasure. I could eat gobs of chips, okay? A literally ungodly amount of Doritos. And every time I do, I'm satiated for 30 seconds, and then I want more. That's what convenience does. Turn with me to Luke 14. Jesus tells us a story here in Luke 14, 16 through 24. He tells a story that kind of illustrates this, and then it kind of helps us start to work our way through it. So a lot of times when Jesus taught, he didn't do what all of us pastors do, which is get up and give you a 30-minute sermon, and Jesus sometimes he did that, by the way, but a lot of times he just told stories. And these stories always had some kind of deep spiritual lesson, and that's why they were called parables. And unlike convenience, what parables do is they encourage you to go deeper, to go below the surface, to see a deeper and truer reality outside of yourself. That's what I love about them. And this parable that Jesus tells us in Luke that we're going to read, he illuminates not only the power that convenience has over our lives when it sits in the throne of our lives, but he's also going to tell you hey, there's a cost to that. And he wants us to see the cost, okay? He wants us to see what really happens when convenience fails to deliver on its promises. So Luke 14, we're going to start in verse 16. We're going to read all the way down, I think, to verse 24, okay? So let's read this together. Jesus replied, a certain man was preparing a great banquet and invited many guests. Guy's throwing a party, okay? And at the time of the banquet, he sent his servant to tell those who had been invited, hey, food's ready, right? Come, everything's ready. But they all alike began to make excuses. The first said, I just bought a field. I got to go see it. Please excuse me, right? Another said, I just bought 5 yoke of oxen, Been there, right? So and on my way to try him out, please excuse me. So another said, I just got married, and the old ball and chain. The servant came back, and he reported this to his master. Then the owner of the house became angry. And he ordered his servant, go out quickly into the streets and alleys of the town and bring in the poor, the crippled, the blind, and the lame. Sir, the servant said, what you've ordered has been done, but there's still room. Then the master told his servant, go out to the roads and country lanes and compel them to come in so that my house will be full. I tell you, not one of those who were invited will get a taste of my banquet. Okay, so now there's the story. There it is. Guy's preparing a huge party. He wanted everyone to be there, but everyone who was invited, though giving what on the surface at least seemed like, I don't know, pretty good reasons for not being able to come. I mean, they were apologetic, They're nevertheless, in the story anyway, Jesus clearly categorizes them as excuses. And that's really the first issue Jesus raises for us in this story when it comes to king convenience and its failed promises. Here's what he says. He says, when convenience is your king, when convenience is our king, what happens is we make excuses into priorities. Ooh, that's a little uncomfortable, right? Because, I've said stuff like this before. I really want to come. I just got a lot going on. And what you are supposed to say back to me is, I understand. Right? I've said, I really wish I could. It's just been such a crazy season. And you're supposed to say, yeah, me too. Don't worry about it, right? How about this one? I'm just giving you, I shouldn't be giving you these because now I can't say them. I'm at capacity right now. I am so important, and I have so many important things going on. I can't fit one more really important thing. Listen, I think it probably is true that as a culture, generally, we're more busy than we ever have been. I think it's probably true. But I also think it's true that we have more options than we've ever had. And for some of us who maybe are recovering people pleasers, we're struggling to navigate that because it's hard for us to say no, period. And so I'm kind of triggering you even right now. Am I just supposed to say yes to everything? No, I'm just trying to say this, okay? I think we need to be honest with ourselves about why we're saying yes to what we're saying yes to. And I think we need to be honest with ourselves about why we're saying no to what we're saying no to. Because we're all making those decisions. All of us are. For some of us, this I'm at capacity deal is a rubber stamp for I'm going to do whatever I want. Right? Just rubber stamp my choice. And we all do it. This isn't like, me too. Me too, okay? And we all understand, right? That's the other layer to this, okay? Convenience crowdsources its power. Convenience crowdsources its power. It works because all of us do it. All of us do it. We all know that on some level, all of us are just making the same excuses about not doing what we should be doing. Or maybe not doing what God is inviting us to do. We all know that our busyness really isn't a good excuse, at least not to God. May fly with each other, but that's only because we're enabling each other. if I let you off the hook for what you're doing, you're going to let me off the hook for what I'm doing. And then it all works out, you know? And we might lament the rise of screens or sports travel schedules or consumerism or overextendedness or a lack of generosity, whatever it is, right? But what we're getting in return is permission to just do whatever we want or to not do whatever we don't want. And for most of us, it feels like it's pretty fair trade. Now, it gets a little bit more uncomfortable before it gets better. Because Jesus finishes his story in a really interesting way. It takes kind of a twist that is kind of an uncomfortable twist. And this is where I think he takes the crack that's in convenience's dam, so to speak, and he just kind of blows it wide open and lets the flood through, okay? Because the party thrower in the story, who symbolizes God, if you're not picking up on that, okay? The party thrower isn't very understanding. Right? He's not very understanding. He gets, literally in the story, he gets angry. He's not just content to allow convenience to mean empty seats around his table. He's not about that. And so what does he do? What does he do? Well, he goes to the people who aren't being well served by convenience. Because as it turns out, convenience isn't working for everyone. And it's not serving everyone equally. In the story, it's not working great for the homeless. It's not working great for the poor. It's not working great for the disabled and the disadvantaged. Convenience is not a great king for people who usually don't get an invite, who aren't in the right circles, who are usually on the outside looking in. So what does God do? He invites them because he knows they're going to say yes. They're going to say yes. And you better believe that when they got in that invitation, not only did they RSVP, but they cleared their schedule and they made sure they were there. And I want you to just see the difference here, okay? This is the thing that's going to stick down into your spirit and bang around down there. And it needs to. And mine too. The difference is this. There's a group of people who are busy people, they're family people, they're productive people, they're good people. But there's this group of people that have a tendency to see the world through their own convenience. And what Jesus is saying is this: that lens of convenience causes us to see even the coolest of God's invitations as a threat to whatever we already have going on. God invites us to draw near to him, to love others. He invites us to become more generous, more patient, more kind. Like just awesome things. But for those of us who view the lens through our own convenience, all of these invitations are just options. They're just options, you know. They're more things that are on top of all the other things that I got going on. And frankly, I don't know that they're even as good as everything I got going on. So that's one group of people. Now there's this other group of people in the story, that people that they don't have as many of those good things. And they don't see the world through the lens of their own convenience because their world isn't convenient. It's just not. It's mostly inconvenient, but it's because they don't see the world through this lens of convenience, it's because convenience is not sitting on the throne of their life, that they can see God's invitation for what it truly is, which is better than whatever they have going on. And it is. God's invitation is just so much better than whatever you got packed into your calendar. It just is. It just is. And we might just rage against the black and white thinking there, but Jesus is kind of forcing us into that, okay? And I think the lesson he wants us to take from this story is this: in order for us to say yes to God's invitation, in order for us to say yes to God's vision, we're going to need to dethrone convenience. We really are. Because I think as long as convenience is your king, you're going to be able to see anything else as better. So the question for us How do you do that, right? How do you do that? How do you dethrone convenience? Because it's easier said than done. It turns out convenience's tentacles go pretty deep and they go pretty wide, down to a cellular level, I think, so to speak. So let's back up a little bit. I want to go back to Luke real quick here. I want to see what inspired Jesus to tell this story in the first place. And I think when we see what inspired Jesus to tell the story, we're going to start to see a pathway forward here. So back up in Luke 14 again, back up to verse 12. We're just going to read through 14. Then Jesus said to his host, when you give a luncheon or a dinner, don't invite your friends, your brothers, your sisters, your relatives, your rich neighbors. If you do, they may invite you back and you'll be repaid. But when you give a banquet, invite the poor, the crippled, the lame, the blind, and you'll be blessed. Although they can't repay you, you're not going to get anything out of it. You will be repaid at the resurrection of the righteous. So here's a lesson from the origin story here, okay? And it's a really critical thing for us to understand if we're going to start dethroning convenience from our hearts, from the throne of our lives, okay? Here's the lesson. When convenience is king, you chase always after what seems better for me now. Better for me now, better for me now, better for me now. If you want to start to see this, am I chasing something that's just better for me now? Because what Jesus always does when he's your king is he pushes you to chase after things that are best for others later. Best for others later. Best for others later. That's a mantra maybe. Is it better for me now or better for others later? Best for me now, better for others later. With convenience, what's good is always what's instant, what's urgent. With Jesus, what's good always takes time. It always stands the test of time. And it always goes beyond me. Better for me now or best for best for others later. So with that in mind, okay, practically, how do we start to dethrone convenience? And I'm just going to say this. We've created a resource for you that your weekend hopes is going to come and she's going to invite you into. And so most of the practical side of this, we really want you to start doing some adventures with God this week. But I want to set us up for that, okay? So here's the headline: Dethroning Convenience. The good news is this: there's 3 adventures that God's going to invite us. I just want you to know that God, I think, is probably inviting us on. They all involve you doing less. How many of us want to just do less? How many of us are liars? Okay. All right. That's the thing about convenience, right? Oh, it's going to create such a simpler life for you. It's going to be so great. You just start to get, the more you pursue convenience, the more cluttered and frenzied and full your life becomes. These adventures that God invites us into, they all invite us to get off the hamster wheel and do something less. And we're going to watch what God does as he does that, okay? So 3 of them I want to talk about super fast here. Sabbath, solitude, and silence. Sabbath, solitude, and silence. Sabbath is this. Sabbath's a day where your only obligation is to enjoy God's good gifts and give him thanks. What a cool day that would be. Now, it's also terrifying because it invites you to say no to all the other things that you feel like you can't say no to, right? That's the terrifying thing about it. But even if you just start small, just start somewhere, There's a reason that God embedded this in the 10 Commandments. There's a reason that Jesus still picks it up and reminds us the Sabbath was made for you. It's not another thing for you to do. It's something that you just get to enjoy. We'd love to talk to you more about that in the resource we'll provide, number 1. Number 2 is this: solitude. Solitude. Now listen, I am introverted. And so I love that. I love solitude. I love it when you just stop talking to me. How about that? My son, when he was, I just knew this is my kid. And he was 4 or 5. He came home from preschool or kindergarten, something like that. And my wife, who's not introverted, she's very extroverted, peppering him with questions, How was your day? And this kid eventually says, "Could you please stop talking to me?" Solitude is this: it's setting aside time and a place to just be with God and God alone. Just with him. Not with him in my email, not with him in my music, not with him in my to-do list, not with him, no, just with him. Just with him. Getting myself into a spot where my only attention is just talking with him and listening to him. The resource will tell you more about that. But the last one is this, and a lot of times it's a great thing to kind of marry to solitude and silence. God may be inviting you on an adventure just to disconnect from all those forms of noise so that you can listen to his voice. This is the irony of convenience. Convenience, again, which promises such a simple life, is so noisy. It's so noisy. Because you're going to buy stuff and listen to stuff and watch stuff, and you just have, all of us have so much noise just kind of banging around in our minds and our hearts and our spirits all the time. And so some of us need to start by pursuing even brief moments of silence, where we allow ourselves to disconnect from all of the noise so that we can start to discover what's going on inside of us, and to even hear God's voice, and to be reminded of how near and good he really is. So your weekend host is going to tell you more about that, okay? But I would love to just kind of pray us all into that. Okay, so let's do that together. Father in heaven, all of us struggle with this king, how convenience just rules and reigns over our lives. God, it's a hard thing to deal with. It just is. It's so enmeshed. God, even as we start to maybe tackle this battle this week with some adventures with you, remind us that we're not doing it in our own power and our own effort, but that we're doing it with you. What you want for us is a life of peace, of centeredness, confidence in you, and submission to you. So help us to go on some adventures with you this week. Jesus, we pray this in your name. Amen.